Everybody around me is talking about the new X-Men episodes right now, and I keep noticing the same thing. Most of these people either never watched the original series, or they remember it in blurry little pieces, and I'm just gonna say it, that is unacceptable to me. This is personal. I used to fake being sick to skip school, so I could spend the whole day watching Spider-Man, X-Men, and Fantastic Four back to back. So seeing people enjoy X-Men 97 without knowing the legend it came from, that's an insult to those days. This is a matter of pride now, so I went back and rewatched all 5 seasons, all 76 episodes, and today I'm walking you through the entire story, start to finish. By the end of this, every single thing happening in X-Men 97 will finally make sense. Quick heads up before we dive in, I'm going to lovingly roast some of these characters along the way, and every joke and hot take you hear is purely my own opinion, coming from a guy who adores this show with his whole heart. So no anger in the comments, we're all friends here. And speaking of which, if you love deep dives into classic Marvel like this, hit that subscribe button, it genuinely helps the channel more than you know. Alright, let's go back to 1992. First, understand what this show even was. October 31st, 1992, Fox Kids, Saturday morning, and here's the part most people have no clue about. This show almost never existed. Marvel had already tried an X-Men cartoon a few years earlier with a pilot called Pride of the X-Men, and it flopped so hard nobody picked it up. The network had almost zero faith in this second attempt, and then it premiered and became a monster. At its peak, this thing was reaching over 23 million households. It got so big that Haim Saban, the producer, has literally credited its success with helping him sell his next little project to Fox. That project was Power Rangers, so in a weird way, you can thank the X-Men for the Power Rangers existing. History is funny like that. And here's another thing that made it revolutionary. The first 13 episodes flowed into each other as one continuous story. That sounds normal today, but back then American cartoons just did not do that. Every episode was supposed to reset, so kids could jump in anywhere. The producers fought tooth and nail for an actual ongoing plot, and they won. This show basically invented binge watching for a generation that didn't even have the internet yet. Oh, and that theme song, that legendary guitar riff. Fun fact, it became so iconic that decades later it ended up at the center of an actual lawsuit, with claims it resembled an old Hungarian TV theme, a cartoon intro so hard it went to court. Respect. Now, the team. Let me introduce the class. You've got Professor Charles Xavier, the most powerful mind on the planet, running a school for gifted youngsters, which is the politest possible way of saying a combat academy in a mansion. There's Cyclops, the team leader, shoots concussive laser beams out of his eyes. Now hold on, I know some of you love clowning on Cyclops, but let me remind you of something. This same roster includes Jubilee, whose superpower is shooting sparks out of her hands. Fireworks, that's the power. My guy Cyclops can slice a tank in half with a glance, and meanwhile there's a team member whose abilities are best suited for entertaining children at a county fair. So let's show the man with the laser eyes a little respect. Then there's Jean Grey, powerful telepath. Remember her name because oh boy, we will get there. Wolverine, our beloved walking anger management case with metal claws, whose battle strategy for 5 straight seasons is charging in face first and getting bodied, then winning the rematch out of pure spite. Storm, who controls the weather but cannot, under any circumstances, just quietly make it rain. No, she has to announce every single attack, like she's performing Shakespeare in the park. Lightning does not strike unless Storm has first delivered a full dramatic monologue about it. Rogue, Southern powerhouse who absorbs powers through touch, which means she can never touch anyone she loves. Genuinely one of the saddest power sets in comics. Beast, a giant blue genius who quotes philosophy while suplexing robots. Gambit, a Cajun charmer who charges playing cards into explosives and flirts with anything that has a pulse. And Little Jubilee, our firework festival, who to be fair, is the audience stand-in, the newbie kid through whose eyes we enter this world. Season 1, the show immediately traumatizes an entire generation. The series opens with Jubilee, a scared teenager whose powers just kicked in, getting hunted by giant purple robots called Sentinels. Mutant hunting machines, built because a chunk of humanity has decided people born different are a threat. The X-Men save her, and we're off. But here's where the show played absolutely zero games. On the very first mission, everything goes wrong. Beast gets captured and thrown in prison, and Morph, the team's shape-shifting jokester, the guy delivering comic relief all episode, shields Wolverine during the escape and goes down. Gone. Episode 2. Let me repeat that for the people in the back. A Saturday morning kids cartoon took a beloved team member off the board in its second episode. Imagine being 8 years old, sitting there in your pajamas with your cereal, watching it happen. That bowl of cereal went cold, my friend, and the show didn't brush past it either. Wolverine spends a huge chunk of the season drowning in guilt, lashing out at Cyclops for giving the order to retreat. Consequences were real here. That was the entire point. Meanwhile, Beast, and this is peak Beast behavior, refuses to break out of prison. This man could bend those bars like breadsticks. Instead, he sits in his cell, calmly reading classic literature, waiting for the justice system to work, because he believes in doing things the right way. An absolute gentleman, a scholar, possibly too good for this world. The season's big political thread is Senator Robert Kelly, a politician running an entire campaign on registering and controlling mutants. And this leads into the show adapting one of the most famous X-Men stories ever, Days of Future Past. A gruff time traveler named Bishop arrives from a horrific future where Sentinels rule everything, and he's here to stop the event that caused it, the assassination of Senator Kelly. Problem is, he thinks the assassin is one of the X-Men, and all signs point to Gambit. Chaos, accusations, the team turning on each other, and the actual culprit turns out to be the shapeshifter Mystique impersonating him. The X-Men save Kelly, the man who hates them, because that's the whole thesis of this show. Protect the world that fears you anyway. There's also a quietly heartbreaking episode where a so-called cure for mutation appears, and Rogue, the one person with every reason to want it, the woman who can't hold hands with anyone, ultimately walks away from it. Season 1 wraps with the giant Sentinel brain master mold going rogue, and get this, Professor X and Magneto, sworn ideological enemies, fighting side by side to bring it down, and in the middle of all this madness, Cyclops proposes to Jean. Action, politics, and a marriage proposal in the same 22 minutes. They really don't make them like this anymore. Oh, and Magneto, the master of magnetism, the show's crown jewel villain, a man who survived humanity's worst history and decided mutants will never be victims again. He's terrifying, he's theatrical, and he argues with Xavier mid-battle like they're an old divorced couple fighting over furniture. Their relationship is the beating heart of this entire franchise, and you're gonna want to remember that for the finale. Trust me. And while we're on Season 1, quick word about Wolverine's backstory, because the show handled it brilliantly. We slowly learn that Logan's memories are Swiss cheese, that a shadowy government program called Weapon X strapped him to a table and coated his skeleton in unbreakable metal against his will. And here's a piece of trivia that shows how ahead of the curve this series was. The famous Weapon X comic came out in 1991, and the show adapted it into an episode by 1993, moving almost in real time with the source material. This cartoon wasn't chasing the comics, it was keeping pace with them, sometimes side by side. Season 2, The Wedding, The Return, and a dinosaur road trip. Season 2 opens with Cyclops and Jean actually getting married, and of course our resident feral gremlin Wolverine handles the news with grace and maturity. I'm kidding, obviously. The man goes into the danger room and shreds a training hologram of Cyclops with his claws while growling about it. Big, liking your crush's wedding photos at 3 a.m. energy. This love triangle stays hilariously messy for the entire series, and I would not have it any other way. But the honeymoon lasts about 11 minutes, because guess who crashes it? Morph, the friend everyone thinks is gone. Turns out a scientist called Mr. Sinister scraped him off death's doorstep and rewired his brain, turning him into a weapon against his own family. And Sinister's actual plan is somehow creepier. He wants Cyclops and Jean's DNA, because their genes combined would produce the perfect obedient mutant army. So yes, the Season 2 villain is essentially an evil geneticist wedding crasher. Imagine your best friend coming back from the dead, specifically to sabotage your honeymoon. This poor team cannot have one nice day. Meanwhile, in the season's weirdest and low-key funniest subplot, Professor X and Magneto get stranded together in the Savage Land, a hidden jungle full of dinosaurs, with both of their powers switched off. The two most powerful mutants on the planet, reduced to two middle-aged men hiking through prehistoric mud, bickering the entire time. It's the buddy comedy nobody asked for and everybody needed. On the darker side, this season also introduces the Friends of Humanity, an anti-mutant hate group, and the show handles that material with a seriousness that honestly still holds up today. There's also a whole thread with Apocalypse cooking up a deadly engineered plague designed to be blamed on mutants, with the time traveler Cable crashing in to stop it, because apparently one time traveler per show was not enough. This series collected time travelers like Infinity Stones. And I have to talk about the Rogue episode, because it might be the most quietly devastating thing this show ever did. We finally learn where her flight and super strength actually came from. Years ago, under Mystique's influence, a young Rogue grabbed a hero named Miss Marvel and held on too long. She didn't just borrow the powers, she kept them, permanently, along with pieces of the woman's mind, while Miss Marvel's own life was left shattered. So every time Rogue lifts a truck or soars through the sky, she's using something that was never hers. and she knows it. And the ghost of what she did literally haunts her inside her own head. A kid's show, carrying that kind of guilt storyline. Unbelievable. Real quick, since we're deep in the nostalgia zone, let me ask you something. After this video, which classic cartoon should I break down next? The 90s Spider-Man series? Fantastic Four? The Incredible Hulk show? Drop your pick in the comments because I am absolutely making more of these. Okay, back to the mutants. Season 3. The show looks at racism and says, you know what's bigger? Space. Season 3 is where this cartoon lost its mind in the best possible way. It kicks off with the 5-part Phoenix Saga. Jean Grey merges with a cosmic entity called the Phoenix Force, one of the oldest and most powerful forces in the universe. Suddenly we're dealing with an alien empire called the Shi'ar, their unhinged emperor Deken, a galaxy-ending artifact called the Macron Crystal, and a space queen named Lilandra who becomes very important later, so file her name away. Jean, wielding the Phoenix, saves the entire galaxy and then hurls the crystal into the sun so no one can ever abuse it. Our girl went from school teacher to guardian of creation in 5 episodes. Normal Tuesday for this show, but that was just the setup, because then comes the Dark Phoenix Saga, and this is the one people still talk about 30 years later. A slimy telepath called Mastermind, working for a fancy villain club the comics call the Hellfire Club, though the show renamed them the Inner Circle because you could not exactly say Hellfire on Saturday morning television, starts quietly poisoning Jean's mind, and that manipulation cracks open something in the Phoenix. Jean transforms into Dark Phoenix, a being of pure appetite with godlike power, and goes full cosmic horror on everyone, including the people she loves. Her family has to fight her, and the arc ends with Jean choosing to sacrifice herself to protect the universe from what she's become. On a kids' network, between toy commercials, an entire generation of children got their first real lesson in tragedy from this exact storyline, and honestly, we turned out fine. Mostly. Now here's the deep-cut trivia I promised you. In the show, Jean gets brought back when the Phoenix takes a little life force from each of her teammates. Sweet, right? Except here's what actually happened behind the scenes. The episode meant to properly explain her return got delayed for 2 years because of animation production problems. 2 years. So as far as the kids watching TV in order were concerned, Jean died, and then a while later she was just there, back. Zero explanation, pouring coffee in the mansion, and we accepted it. That was the beautiful chaos of 90s television. Resurrection was simply not a plot point worth explaining on schedule. Decades later, when the show landed on streaming, Disney actually reordered the entire episode list into the originally scripted sequence after fans complained, which means the version you can binge today makes more sense than the one we watched live. We suffered, so you don't have to. Season 3 also quietly stacked the roster's history. We meet Iceman, a founding X-Man who quit the team before the show even started, basically the rebellious older brother who dropped out of the family business. And Wolverine gets a brutal blast from the past in Lady Deathstrike, a former love of his life turned metal-clawed enemy, because Logan's romantic history is exclusively populated by people who now want him gone. The man cannot catch a break in any decade. And by the way, this is technically a Spider-Man video too. Because here's something a lot of people never realized. This X-Men series exists in the same universe as the 90s Spider-Man animated series. Officially, same continuity, Earth 92131 for you hardcore lore people. And they actually crossed over. In Spider-Man's own show, when Peter Parker's mutation was spiraling out of control, he went looking for help from, guess who? Professor Charles Xavier. He met the X-Men, traded quips, fought alongside them, even watched a Sentinel training session in the Danger Room. So if you're wondering why a Spider-Man channel is covering X-Men today, that's why. This is Peter's neighborhood too. These shows were one big connected world before shared universes were even cool. Season 4, Nightcrawler, Trauma, and the ending that wasn't. Season 4 might be the most quietly stacked season of the whole run. You get one man's worth, a genuinely dark two-parter where a time traveler goes back to 1959 and takes out a young Charles Xavier before he ever forms the X-Men. The result is a nightmare timeline of open war between humans and mutants, a world with no dream and no hope. It's the show flat out telling you, this one bald man in a wheelchair is the only thing holding civilization together. Heavy stuff. Then there's the Nightcrawler episode, where the team meets a blue teleporting mutant who looks like a demon but has the gentlest soul on the planet. A Saturday morning cartoon calmly sitting down to discuss faith, forgiveness, and self-acceptance, and absolutely nailing it. Fans still rank it among the best episodes ever made. And they're right. Wolverine also gets put through the ringer this season by a reality-warping mutant called Proteus, who bends Logan's body like taffy and leaves the most fearless man on the team genuinely traumatized. Watching Wolverine, of all people, be afraid of something, that hit different. And then the season closes with the 4-part epic Beyond Good and Evil, and pay attention, because this connects straight to what you're watching right now in X-Men 97. Apocalypse, the ancient blue-lipped mutant with a god complex the size of a continent, tries to seize control of time itself, kidnapping the world's most powerful psychics as part of a plan to remake all of existence. It takes the X-Men plus their enemies plus time travelers from multiple eras to stop him. Here's the wild part. This arc was written as the actual grand finale of the entire series. And here's the even wilder part. The show made Apocalypse such a massive deal that Marvel's giant 1995 comic event, Age of Apocalypse, rode directly on that wave. The cartoon was steering the comics. Let that sink in. And now that same Apocalypse is the big bad of X-Men 97 Season 2. Nothing in this franchise is random. Alright, deep breath. Because everything up to this point was the appetizer. What comes next is the reason you clicked on this video. Season 5, the budget vanishes, and then the show delivers its masterpiece. So Beyond Good and Evil was supposed to be the end, but Fox, at the last possible minute, ordered more episodes. Great news, right? One small catch. They slashed the budget while doing it. Production got handed to a different overseas studio, and the animation style changed so visibly that characters suddenly looked like distant cousins of themselves. I'm not going to be mean about it. The artists did what they could with what they were given, but let's just say Wolverine occasionally looks like he was drawn from memory by someone who had him described to them over the phone. Episodes also aired wildly out of order during this stretch, which turned the continuity into soup. And yet, buried in this messy final season is the single greatest episode this show ever produced. Before we get there, a couple of gems from this season deserve a shout out. There's a two-parter where a techno-organic alien hive called the Phalanx starts absorbing the entire planet, and the situation gets so desperate that Beast has to team up with, wait for it, Mr. Sinister and Magneto to save the world, one of the strangest hero lineups ever assembled. There's also a genuinely touching episode revealing Nightcrawler and Mystique's family connection, tying two fan favorites together with actual emotional weight. And by the way, here's one more piece of trivia for the road. Morph was never supposed to come back at all. The character was created to stay gone, to prove the stakes were real, but the fan reaction to losing him was so overwhelming that the writers brought him home. The audience literally loved a character back from the dead, and it's a good thing they did, because Morph matters a lot in what happens next. Graduation Day, September 20th, 1997, the finale that created X-Men 97. Here's how it goes down. Professor Xavier, already worn thin from years of fighting anti-mutant legislation, shows up at a press conference to challenge a government hardliner named Henry Gyrich. And Gyrich, mid-event, in front of cameras, pulls out an energy disruptor and blasts him. Xavier's telepathic powers turn against his own body. He collapses into a coma. And just like that, the most powerful mind on Earth is dying, and there is nothing anyone can do. Beast can't fix this. Moira McTaggart, one of the smartest scientists alive, can't fix this. There's exactly one hope left. Lilandra, the Shi'ar space queen from the Phoenix Saga, whose alien technology could keep him alive. Told you to remember her. One problem, she's on the other side of the galaxy, and the only way to reach her is a telepathic signal boosted far beyond anything Xavier's dying mind can manage alone. Meanwhile, news of the shooting spreads, and the mutant world erupts. Riots everywhere, rage everywhere, and every furious mutant on the planet turns their eyes toward one man, Magneto. He calls them all to the island of Genosha, and suddenly the thing he has preached about for his entire life is real and standing in front of him. An army, a united mutant force ready to take the planet, with the X-Men leaderless and broken. His dream, gift-wrapped, at the exact moment his greatest opponent can't stop him. The team even gets desperate enough that Morph, yes, Morph, back with his family after everything Sinister did to him, impersonates Xavier on live television to calm the riots. It doesn't work. Some fires you can't fake your way out of. So Cyclops, Jean and Wolverine fly to Genosha for what looks like a suicide mission, interrupting Magneto's big moment in front of his brand new army. And the fight stops cold when Jean tells him the truth. Charles is dying. And here, right here, is the greatest character moment this franchise has ever produced. Magneto stands there doing the math. Stay, and everything he's ever wanted is his. Leave, and the dream evaporates. The army scatters. The moment never comes again. The villain of the entire series looks at his life's ambition, sitting right there in his hands, and he walks away from it, for one dying friend. Because underneath 30 years of ideology and rage, Charles Xavier is the only person on this planet who ever truly knew him. Now imagine that for a second. Imagine your life's single greatest wish, finally, actually within reach, and the price is the one person who never gave up on you. That's not a cartoon dilemma. That's as real as writing gets. Magneto returns with them and uses his power to amplify Xavier's fading telepathy, hurling one last message across the stars to Lilandra, and while they wait, Xavier says goodbye, one by one, to every single X-Man. He tells them what they meant to him, what they became, the children of his dream all grown up. The writer of this episode has said that scene still chokes her up decades later, and honestly, same. His heart briefly stops. Lilandra arrives just in time, revives him, and tells them the only way he survives is if he leaves with her, to be healed among the Shi'ar, far from Earth, possibly forever. And so the X-Men, plus Magneto, stand together and watch their teacher, their father, rise into the sky and vanish into the stars. No final battle, no explosion, just a family saying goodbye. That's how the legendary series ended. Fade to black, September 1997. And now, connect the wires. X-Men 97 opens roughly a year after that exact moment. The team is grieving, and in his will, Xavier leaves leadership of the X-Men to, of course, Magneto, the man who gave up his army to save him, betting one final time that his oldest friend can carry the dream. That's why Magneto is leading the X-Men. That's the whole answer. One shot fired at a press conference in 1997. Morph being on the team, that's the finale too. He came home. Genosha becoming a mutant homeland, seated right there in the original series, which is exactly why what happens to Genosha in 97 Season 1 hits as hard as it does. And Season 2's big villain Apocalypse is the same time-stealing monster from Beyond Good and Evil, the arc that was supposed to end everything. The new show isn't just borrowing nostalgia, it's finishing sentences the old show started 3 decades ago. So here's what I'll leave you with. This was a Saturday morning cartoon that refused, absolutely refused, to talk down to kids. It looked at 8-year-olds eating cereal and gave them prejudice, loss, sacrifice, faith, redemption, and a villain whose greatest victory was choosing love over ideology. It outlived its budget, survived its own airing schedule, shaped the comics it was based on, and 30 years later its direct continuation is one of the best things Marvel is making. Not bad for a show nobody believed in after a failed pilot. So now I want to hear from you, Team Xavier or Team Magneto, and be honest, which storyline shocked you the most? And most importantly, which classic series do I cover next? 90s Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, or the Hulk? Drop it all in the comments. If this video saved you 76 episodes of homework, the least you can do is subscribe. We've got a lot more Marvel history to dig through together. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Class dismissed.